Hello. It looks like we should be good to go. Uh, hey, Darren, Shahan, Stephen, thank you for joining us. We are on our fourth episode of Exploring the Library. I'm really excited about this. We we kept things going, and we have so many more topics to go over. Yeah, it's just crazy. I know with the game design live streams, over time we just kind of we're trying to figure out what to talk about, what's new. But like for this show, there's so many things to talk about. So I'm really
Yeah.
excited about this one. This episode's really interesting for me because I'm going to be learning as much as everyone else. I think people think I'm a lot better at this game than I actually am. I don't think about the first turn move nearly as deeply as I probably should. So a lot of this is going to be Alex. I know that ahead of time, Shahan posted up some questions, and I have those noted, so I'll be making sure we go over those topics. And if you're watching, make sure we cover everything you want us to cover. Uh, is it not rolling?
Bum
Can
bum bum.
can people hear us? Um, yeah, I'm curious if it
I
says
sent the message.
yeah, everything says it should be going. So I'd be surprised if it's not operating. Okay, Shahan confirmed they can hear us. So yeah, I have those questions written down. We'll be making sure we go over those. I have a bunch of questions myself. And we'll be going from there. Before we jump into this too deeply, I want to give a huge shout out to our Patreon supporters. Thank you so much for everything you do and for helping us get so far. Next month's Patreon package is going to be Subjugation Strike. That's the promo for next month, which is super exciting. And that will come with your foil cores if you're getting those. And then for Future League, we're going to be getting Stone Protector of Nye, which is going to be pretty cool. So thank you, everyone, for all that. And then, Alex, take it away. How do you want to start this?
I don't know if there's a specific way to start this. This is a very, very expansive topic, so I'm just gonna hope to hit as much of it as possible. Uh, I think I'm just gonna go into it. So, right in front of us, we'll start with this pyramid right here. This
Okay.
is the basic movement without any additional cards that a champion can go from the starting position.
Mm-hmm.
All the spots without exert are obviously a single move, so you're going to be able to play actions. All the spots with exert are the double movements.
Okay.
So every single one of these spots is essentially going to put you in a different position versus your opponent. Your opponent is going to need to go that extra amount of positions to get to you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the basic, simple premise of it.
Okay.
Of the positioning. We're going to go into much deeper as we go. We're going to go deeper depending on what type of champion you have. So we can move up here to the 5 listings we're going to say that they are. I've sort of categorized them how I think they can go. So over here on the far right, you have your mages. Then you have your direct summoners. Then we have what me and Sid are currently calling the mid-range. They can sort of go either way towards the fighter side, or they can sort of play the mage side, or they can sort of play the summoner side. Then you have the straight-up fighters. They really can't do much of the mage side. They really can only do much of the fighter side. And then you have the combo piece. The combo piece is unique because of how squishy it is. It really can't hold the proper position of a fighter, but as we all know, it can still take you out quite quickly if you face the OTK deck.
Yeah.
The interesting thing I think about this sort of categorization I think I've made is that if you look at a category, so let's example the mage can usually go to the left or right of its category. So you can play a mage as a summoner absolutely easily. There's
Mm-hmm.
nothing stopping a mage from playing a summoner, just due to the nature of summons usually costing aura and the high aura pool of a mage. However, a mage a lot of the time can be a combo player. We definitely are starting to see the Nubia OTK decks.
That's true.
There, you constantly see the Kendra teleport deck, which isn't necessarily trying to kill you, but it's trying to clear out your hand. The Erica deck also has its own combo style. It's much different than the rest. It's the landslide combo.
Yes.
It's to lock you down constantly. The Idris is the off-brand one where the closest thing you can sort of consider the combo that goes with her is the meteorite combo style.
Yeah.
It isn't crazy popular. I know Steve-O took it to the circuit. I was afraid of it because I was playing Nubia, which is the most vulnerable to it. But it's there. The I think the most awkward of the bunch, which doesn't necessarily follow the two, is the summoner. They can play some mage stuff, they can play some fighter stuff, but their inherent kit tends them to the summoner. Nothing about their kit makes you go, I want to play fighter, I want to play spellcaster. The closest you can say is Long's got 28 health, he's a beefy boy.
Well, he also has a swift attack for 2. Which is
for sure.
Pretty decent.
Yeah. But on the spellcaster side or on the technique side, he doesn't have any reduced endurance.
Yeah. And
so otherwise,
I guess a big portion of these two also is that they're summon like their secondary ability targets mainly summons, and it's doing a positive thing. So you don't really want to do these to your opponent, unlike Core, where you'll want to do that. But like Odara and Long, you're right. Like without playing summons, you're basically losing 50% of your champion.
Yeah, exactly. Over here, which we're calling the mid-range right now, I don't know if we'll keep that name or what we'll call them. They have they have better aura than the fighters. They have the combat ability of the fighters. They some of them are a little bit under, some of them are at the same level. But because of their aura, they have that little extra bit where they can play summons more freely than a fighter can.
Okay.
They don't necessarily go heavy on the spell casting side, except for I would say Core is definitely the offside where he's got a lot more aura, so he can be a lot more aggressive with it. But they can easily play a fighter role. Like you can play them as fighters, and it doesn't feel wrong at all. There's nothing that feels wrong about it. You can play them as play summons with them, and it doesn't feel wrong because the summons are just supporting you as you go out and fight, versus the summoners where it's you are supporting the summons.
Yeah.
And they have enough aura to play some spells. They're more weaker on the spell side, but I have definitely played Kun as a spellcaster. I don't know if I played a raw spellcaster deck, and I've definitely played Core as a spellcaster deck. They have the capabilities. The advantage to this is that, unlike the other spellcasters, they usually have a bit more sustainability and survivability when they go out into those less protective positions. We can jump over the fighters. It's really hard to play them as full casters. You can play a bit with summons, but you can't go hard with the summons, or else you quickly run out of resources. So their role is very much sort of more heavily leaned towards the fighter side and the technique side. So they can sometimes play this role. They can't really play this role. And they can play a few spell cards, but after they're done that, they can no longer play the spellcaster role.
Yeah. Like, he might be running a few landslides in a Fong deck, and if she drops 2 or 3 of them, that's great. But in those 2-3 landslides that you've played, you have to have done a lot more damage on top of those. Yeah.
And then we have the combo, which is not really follow the rest of the categories so much, is that it is what I don't know how this works within our list. Rain's unique because she's so squishy.
Yeah.
It's possible that the real role that she's supposed to be playing here is the assassin role.
Mm-hmm.
and it's sort of shifted into combo. I think is maybe what's happened to her.
Hmm.
Cause not many people are able to sort of play the get in, get out play style, which would be more of an assassin, I think maybe.
Yeah. I do think
Rather,
that it's more of a niche space of the fighter. Like
yes, yes, 100.
it's it is a very particular style of fighter, because she doesn't have the stats to really push forward as Fong and Malik do.
Mhm.
Like her aura is really low. She has the energy reduction. The awareness is really what separates her from everyone. The awareness and the built-in attack for 3, but the 18 health is just it's so painful being so low.
Yeah, for sure. And so each of these subtypes are going to play differently on their first turn. And then each of these champions are going to play differently on their first turn. We're probably not going to go in depth on every single type of champion. I'm probably going to stick just to the categories to make it simpler on myself.
Okay.
So we're going to start with the spellcaster, and we're going to
Um,
go.
Before jumping into that, some comments coming in. So from Shahan, probably need some ranges for what you're defining as mages, summoners, and brawlers or fighters. So like, what defines those? I feel like we've gone over that of like, so the mages, a big aspect you notice the commonality, really high aura, so close to 150. Um, Health is a little less important for defining the champion because we see a pretty good range of health, but it is on the lower end. Zero energy reduction. The attack ability is usually useless, and it leans a lot more on the secondary ability. That's how
Yeah,
I define a caster. The summoner, it's a decent amount of aura. We're not going crazy high, we're not low. Health irrelevant, energy reduction irrelevant. Awareness and attack are useful attributes, but not it's super important. Again, it's a secondary ability, but the secondary ability being focused outwards compared to inwards. So, like,
mhm,
visions is all about helping yourself. It doesn't help your summons or anyone else. It's all about helping yourself. Where something like spur or cure are all about helping someone else. Fighters, the big thing is their health, energy reduction, and their attack ability. If those 3 things aren't singing together, that fighter's not working. And then the mid range, like Alex said, it's about uh, a mixture of the stats. And I think that's why you see more, like the Bellum champions are here. The Bellum fighters are here compared to being pushed too far. Because Bellum itself is about balance, so they often have more balanced stats.
yeah.
So I hope that that defines that. Is there anything I missed on that?
No, I don't think so. I think the one mage that, if you were to look at it, you'd be like, well, that's a summoner. You could easily throw Erica there, but Erica doesn't actually need to run any summons in her deck,
Mm-hmm.
and
Again,
that's where
yeah,
the defies that. It breaks that rule of being a summoner. Yeah,
yeah,
she's gonna play summons, but she
yeah,
doesn't have to have any within the deck.
yeah. And again, if you come back to that definition of what does a secondary ability do, it doesn't benefit someone else. It is purely benefiting her by creating another body, by
Yeah,
getting her a resource, an extra card in hand, essentially, that she didn't have before. So I think it still leans into kind of that more selfish mentality that a caster traditionally has. So,
yeah, you heard it.
yeah.
All casters are selfish.
It's I mean, I mean, it's a thing.
Any other questions
And
from the
then
chat?
continuing along that, combo being its own category is a time honored tradition across many games. Mages high aura, low health, lower attack, no energy. Fighters high health. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I am recording this, so if for some reason it doesn't seem like I'm dropping any frames, but if the video isn't great, then I can definitely repost this up on YouTube, the recorded version, and that'll look a little bit nicer. Anyways, let's jump into, I guess, where do you want to start? Fighters or with mages?
I guess we'll start with mages. It's fine. I think I'm going to delete my Malix here, just so it's a clear board. You're seeing what you'd actually see. Oh, my delete is not there. Delete.
All right.
All right. Let's just grab a Kendra. That's fine. Just she's at the bottom of the list. So, step 1, you are facing your opponent. As soon as you see your opponent, you are given information. All right, pick one of these opponents. It doesn't really matter, Sid. It's just
Let's go with core.
Core, sure. I'm moving the wrong list. Let's move these guys to the side for a moment. As soon as the match has started, you know that within Core's deck, there is Axon and there is Phage cards.
Chaos. No Phage.
Yeah, sorry.
You said it with such determination. I just had to correct you.
So, you immediately know the potential threats that are in the deck. Now, it's weirdly enough, it is easier to determine high-level play threats than when you're playing a casual game or a friendly game.
That's true.
Because when there's a casual or a friendly game, you don't know what they're going to play. When you start looking at the threats of a high-level game, you go, oh, I'm facing Core. Okay, what are the big threats that Core can play? All right, he can't have Chrono Walkers. Okay, he can play Tsunamis, so now I see his threat range. He can move up 1 and hit these 6 squares with a single Tsunami. If I move up 1, place a summon right here, in that moment, I already know that I could lose it just like that.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing to think about is the chaos side. One that is really hard to play around, and it really can just get you no matter what. He could have meteorites.
Yeah.
We know 3-Chi is easy to put in your deck. Most likely has a couple Otens. So when I go later on in the game to try to kill him, I have to think about that. Literally, in theory, you need to think about all the potential cards that they can play. That is the first step. Just here, not looking at our cards yet. Just looking at the opponent. Yeah. Now we would look at our 6 cards and what is our strategy. We're not even gonna look at our cards yet. It is what is our strategy.
Okay.
Is our strategy? Are we playing Summoner right now? Do I need to think about the positions of the summons I'm going to be playing? Is my goal to just teleport over here and teleport to him? Do I think that's good enough? Well, I already know he has Chrono Walkers, so I could just be putting myself in a very vulnerable position doing that. That's a very hard one, because if you stop playing the goal of your deck because they might have a defense, you've probably lost the game. Yeah, I've seen this a lot. It's like, oh well, he probably has a dodge. I'm not gonna play my attack, and so he doesn't play it. So you don't play your attack this turn. Following turn comes around. Oh well, he probably has a dodge. I'm not gonna play the attack. You just have to play the attack, get the dodge of the hand, and hope you draw another big attack. Yeah. All right, but let's talk about mages in general. So we know that we're squishy. So generally, and I'm saying generally, the double move is not usually our best play. Not normally, because as soon as you double move, this spot right here puts you in threat from any double ranged attacks that can hit. He can demon rage us. He can do many attacks. Yeah. There's so many things. So this spot is almost rarely never the position, but I'm actually gonna go back one more step, because there's one other thing you gotta think about is, are you the aggressor or are you the defender? This is, I think, a Magic term I've heard before type thing, but I think it's even more important in this type of game. What that means by, if I go head to head with Core, and you'll examine it more based on your hand. Am I going to win with just this starting 6 cards? If I'm not going to win with these 6 starting cards, and I think I'm going to lose the game to his 6 starting cards, I don't ever want to be in this position. I want to keep moving around the board until I draw the cards I need to win. Because that's definitely lost. I've definitely lost with many Kendra in draft format because I go in and then I empty their hand and then I still lose.
Yeah.
Just because they don't have a hand, the base stats of the 2 champions standing in front of us are quite different.
Yeah. Like 6 health point difference, double the attack on core, and then like the resources doesn't matter if you're just looking at the base things. Well, now Nurum can do 2 damage, but core has the double move. Like it's a swift attack, giving him quite a bit of advantage there. Okay, so you're talking about, especially for mages, kind of more the central area, I would say, is definitely a vulnerability for them. Because then you're easily within reach. And unless you're playing a deck that is designed to be in their face aggressive, so you're playing like a Nubia Holy OTK deck or something like that. But if for most casters, it's a time game, right? Is that kind of what I'm getting at? Okay.
Yeah, it's sort of the theory of a mage. It's preparation, learning your spells, being ready, doing it at the right time.
Yeah. So okay, continue.
There's alternates, because right now currently we're just, because we picked random person, it depends on what you're facing.
Yeah.
There is a chance that actually the double move is the right play, because you're playing a summoner, you're facing a summoner, and you want, just for sake, we're just going to leave him here, and you want immediately on the following turn to be able to move up and tsunami this whole area and clear all the summons off their board.
Okay.
But that goes to the same thing. It's about timing. If you sit back versus the summoner, and then they get enough summons and the summons start spreading out, it becomes way harder for you to deal with them.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very true. Like, even against the game we played on Monday, where I had the tsunamis in my hand to knock off a lot of your board, but the issue was you kept on spacing them out, so it was too hard to get to that right point where I was doing the right amount of damage.
I think I thought of a good way to run through a little bit of stuff. I think I'm just going to quickly run the mage versus the other category and what would be the general basics.
Okay.
So we did the mage versus, well, we did core. So the pairing matchup, so mage versus mage, there is no specific better move or other move than the other. This is purely what does your deck do versus their deck, and how can I outplay that? Because you don't, especially on the first round, you don't know what they're playing. You don't know what their style is.
Yeah.
The mage is currently so versatile that this could be a summoner deck. This could be an OTK style deck, where if I run up to 2 positions to take out the summons, they step forward, go bolt shot, tsunami, I'm dead. It's game.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't know.
So, would you recommend maybe staying back, moving to the sides? Do you want to stay paired against them, or how would you play the first few turns?
Paired versus a mage isn't bad. I think pairs pretty safely. It also usually depends on your hand. So again, that's where it's also gonna matter. Are you playing summons? Because if you're playing summons, you're gonna want to probably move to the right because you don't want them to be tsunami easily.
Yeah.
And then get them down to a safe position where the only way it's happening that they're getting this is if they're double chrono walkering, they're teleporting across the board.
Yeah.
And you know that this position is safe for a summon. I'm not going to go too deep into summons because that's probably more important for the summoners.
Yeah. But we're assuming that you're playing the mage as a mage.
As a mage.
Pairing against your opponent. Like, I think one of the biggest issues, which you mentioned before, is just how easily the mage can slide into two different roles. So it's probably best at this point to just suss out your opponent. Figure out what their deck is. If they're coming in with Nubia, you don't know if they're running Nubia Tsunami or Nubia Angels. If they're coming with Idris, you don't know if they're doing Idris Meteorite or Idris Giant Scorpions, right? Erica has you have the Monkey deck, which is a pseudo threat these days. It's interesting, and then you have the Landslide deck. So
Yeah.
all these champions, I've seen people play them as either summoner or caster, and it's probably best early game to just suss out, to figure out what your opponent is. If you can bait them into revealing their strategy early, that could also help you.
That is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would also say it's like just looking at what champion is, the threat level is something. Like
Yeah.
you can't you just in general you usually can't sit back versus Idris as a mage
That's true.
unless you are the combo style that you're gonna teleport over there and then you're just gonna blow out all of Idris's resources in one go. If you just back away, you're gonna start to get burned.
Mm-hmm.
But on the alternate side, if this is Idris Summoner and you walk forward,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have swift responses, you are going to die.
Yeah.
So just because we're here, I'm gonna start say my standard Idris movement play. We're gonna say you moved up for some reason. You moved up. I'm gonna stay exactly where I am. I'm gonna jump to here. I'm gonna play 2 or 3 Baruchs, and I'm gonna fireball you. Turn 1.
That hurts. Yeah.
So you're going to have to figure out what they are, but Idris might be the offlier, because I guess that's one thing I didn't talk about. The faction is very important. I said that when we first look at the champion. So what is the threat? Thymos is the threat that you don't want to move forward versus Thymos. Thymos has all the cards. If you take that one step, even if they don't have jump, and they move 1, they can play a Formosan here and start beating you with rocks.
Yeah. Yeah.
They can play a Baruch here, and it can move up and hit you.
Or any of the Blitz summons, right? You have the
and that's only in Thymos.
Yeah.
Yeah. In Bellum, they can double move and bolt shot you. It's possible. Is that necessarily the best move? Probably not, but they can. That's you have this information in your mind about what they can do.
Yeah.
Is it easy to remember all the threats at every time? No, it's not. So I think in the pairings, though, here, just because we can actually look at them, this is the hardest one to decide upon.
Yeah.
Because if they're playing Angels, I think you need to get up there as fast as possible. If you're facing Erica, there's probably Baihu's coming down quick, so you want to have that AoE to deal with it.
Yeah.
If they're not playing Angels, you just better hope that you have a couple defense cards, and maybe that's part of your thought. Maybe you don't fully go in. Maybe you only go the 1 because you have no defense cards. Maybe you don't go in at all because you don't have defense cards.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you don't go in at all because you don't have any AoE cards.
Yeah, sometimes, again, you might just be biding time, especially if you're playing Axon. You're probably running dedicated studies. You might need to take a few turns to just play dedicated studies and underworld knowledge and change your opening hand to something a little bit more profitable.
All right, I'm going to move us on from the mages, or else I'll talk about it all day.
Yeah, so before we do that, so this is going to be a question that will double up with the summoners, but if you're here, opening move, you're running summons as a mage, going here and dropping multiple summons into this spot. Is that a good idea, or is it better to keep your summons spread out? Is this something?
It depends on the types of summons you're actually summoning. If you're playing a bunch of weenies, you generally just spread them out. Mm-hmm. But your safest thing usually always goes farthest away from the opponent.
Yeah.
Unless it's an aggressive summon, which we talked about Thymos, you won't. If you're in Thymos, you're not running to the side.
Yeah.
You're heading forward. You need to think of the summons are going to protect you by being on the board, but you also need to protect your summons by positioning them in the right spot.
Yeah. My general advice, I'm not a huge fan of bringing out multiple summons on the first turn and just all together. Because if you're playing against, just say, Nubia, if you have multiple summons down, then it's actually worthwhile for Nubia to come and teleport in and play Tsunami or Bolt Shot. Normally, she would hold on to those cards, and it gives you more time with your summons to do something with them. But if you drop, just say, 2 Death's Companions down, and I have a Tsunami and Teleport in my hand, I'm going to play them. It's worth it. So, again, it also is keeping on top of what is the big threats. And I don't know, it's kind of a wishy-washy answer to say that. I'm going to be honest with you, Alex, because staying on top of meta, it's just so much information to do that. But
I'm going to give a contradiction to what you just said, I think.
Okay.
So I'm going to give a reason to play as many summons as possible.
Okay.
The more summons you have on the board, the more control of the tempo of the game you have.
That's fair.
Now, is there the risk for the blowout with a teleport and a Tsunami? Yeah, but you were probably going to get blown out anyways if you played 2 summons. That's something you're going to have to decide versus your opponent. And maybe you play differently on your first game versus your second and your third. You can play less on your first just to figure out what's going on with your opponent and then do it differently. So if you guys watched yesterday's game, there was a core matchup versus an Angel deck. The core matchup was clearly not great. It was a summoner deck. But the best I could do was, I think at one point I had 8 summons out, but I had them all almost spread out all over the board. So that at one, it would be really hard for you to get all of them. I think you could get 2 at a time, essentially. And I think at one point you did it. You were able to Chrono Walker to get 2 Alims and me, which was the best. Which was, you end up winning the game, but it was a very close game. I didn't have any Angel stuff in that deck, so it was.
I think
it was a hard situation.
At the end of the day, I like something about dropping multiple summons or dropping multiple summons in the same spot. It comes down to what your playstyle is. Can you optimize off of that? And how well do you know your opponent? Is it something that your opponent's going to seize advantage of? Because you're right. You can get a lot of tempo by having a lot of summons out early. But the other side to it is it creating an opportunity for your opponent to take it? Now, if you're going second in the round, yeah, definitely. That's completely different. But if you're going first in the round, then you're setting your opponent up to respond to that and come in and do a lot of damage to you. So, yeah, it's situational.
And the other thing to say is, the safest turn for summons is probably turn 1.
Yes.
So if you want to set up that positioning, there's nothing wrong with that. Another position that a lot of summoners won't do, which I don't think they think about, is moving up forward and summoning behind you.
Yeah, that's something I do quite a bit. Actually, so we're going to get to summoners. We should switch to summoners. But like my favorite opener with long is I'll go to the side, rotate, drop a summon over here, and cure it.
Well, that's the best defensive position for a summon.
It's a really weird position to put yourself in, but it's so early in the game that it's fine.
I think it's interesting to look at the 2 summoners at the same time, because I think they're playing 2 different roles. We were talking about Thymos and how they're going to play aggressively, but Long usually plays more defensive, where Odara, usually your goal is to just try to hit them hard as fast as possible. Odara generally almost always moves up ones, summons something big here.
Yeah.
There's not much outside of the Odara strategy than that. Where Long, you can totally just bide your time making this summon right here an unkillable threat.
Yeah. Because once you get...
Then once your opponent makes it up, then they got to deal with this. You can start separating from it, and then start making another threat over here.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. When I see Odara, I don't know any champion who I would So against any of the mages, you definitely want to go up. Against summoners, mid ranges, I think the only thing that really might cause me pause is if I'm playing against a Malik deck, maybe Malik or Fong if they're fighters. But in those type of cases, I might actually consider going second to figure out where they are, so that I can smack them with whatever summon I'm spurring on.
Correct. Yeah,
yeah.
But I will say, for summoners have the advantage versus fighters, because fighters have to get through every single body you play, or constantly be playing tricks to get to you.
Yeah.
Those are essentially the only two options for a fighter, where a mage is just going to blast away through both the summons and you.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there much more to really say about the summoners?
If you can't decide if you want to be threatening or you want to be offensive, the summon position is here. You can summon it right here.
Mm-hmm.
It's out of the threat range of opponent just going double move bolt shots.
Mm-hmm.
It's not out of position of tsunami, because opponent double moves, tsunamis this whole 3.
No, because tsunami's action speed, right? So they can move once unless they're double chrono walkering.
Yeah. So in this case, you're thinking about turn 2, because the thing when you're planning your turn, you're planning for the current turn and the next turn. Those are the two things you're generally thinking about. Unless you're a combo deck, then you're just thinking, please draw the combo. That's generally it. If the mage double moves, which may happen and you went first. If you went first, it's not too bad because you're going to be able to move your summon. But if the mage double moves, if they move once, then you're in tsunami range the following turn.
Yeah. So Shahan brings up the point, would playing against Raha change the way you run summons? Because she has the built-in range.
I will say, especially if you look at the championships, this is probably my least experience facing. I don't think a lot of people play Raha.
Yeah.
And I don't have a lot of experience against Raha, and that is honestly what definitely tripped me up in the finals.
Yeah.
It was just something I wasn't used to. This weird range where Raha double moves and hits something for 2, and I'm like, I double move, get to him, and then he double moves again, and I'm like, I'm still not in a good tsunami positioning. Yeah. Raha's. So I'm going to ask for the question again. Was just how do you play versus Raha?
Yeah, Raha's awareness would greatly affect summons as well. So like, how you play as a summoner, you're gonna change it. I think Correct. It's the one champion you're probably gonna change your playstyle a decent amount against.
The threat range. When you're looking at a summon, you need to look at what is the potential they can do. So while this is the starting position and is not usually the threat range you're looking at, the threat range from this position is that Raha can hit all the way up to here.
Yeah,
these so 4 spots are threatened by just basic Raha. That's not including if they play extra movement. Because if they play a singular extra movement, the threat range is so massive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because...
But that's usually the stuff you can't really play around. If they have extra movement, they have extra movement.
Yeah.
Like, usually, my Tsunami deck, when we were doing training for the championship, and Steve was playing his Angel deck, he would try to get his Angel here. I would double move, Chrono Walker, my turn, Tsunami them all. Because I didn't want a single Angel down on the board.
Yeah. The other thing about Raha, which is an interesting contradiction, even though she has 22 health, I still, every time I play with her, I always find her relatively squishy. I don't find that she can, once she starts getting hit, it hurts a lot.
For sure.
So unless you are dropping a threat that she really has to deal with right away, like a giant scorpion or a Nizu or like a Lightless, she's going to try to stay back.
Yeah.
And build her resources.
Is her distance.
Yeah. So if you can put pressure on her, I think that's one of the best things. If keeping pressure on her is probably one of your better bets as a summoner. unless your summons are very fragile. If you're running like a skeleton deck, for example, you're probably not going to do very well against Raha. So it comes down to what you're running, but you got to be prepared for the fact that Raha has that awareness.
Mm-hmm. It's true. I guess the only other thing we can talk about summons is that as a summoner, you do have those 3 different styles. You have the one very big summon. You have the medium, like the 4-house summons, and then you have the dinky boys.
Yeah. Like,
and you're gonna play differently based on them. And you're gonna be based differently on what their style is. Like a Baruch, almost always is you're going forward with it.
Yeah.
But for the long deck, you're gonna play more defensively. You're gonna play something that's decent, and the more health it gets, that's the threat of it. The threat isn't that it's gonna quickly kill you; it's that you can't quickly kill it.
Yeah.
And then the little summons, I've talked about this before. The little summons are 100% about tempo. I think I lose games because sometimes I bring my 3 chi ups when they would do 10 times better just sitting in this corner walking back and forth.
Yeah. Or just ending their turn exactly there. Yeah.
Sometimes we want to push forward. We want to show this as a threat, but those little dinky guys with 2 health, they're dying. They're just going to die.
Yeah.
Now, and that can win you the game. Is your opponent takes off that 1 turn to kill the little summon. That can win you the game. But control of the turns can be so massive.
Yeah.
Was there any more questions?
No, I think we're good. Let's move on to the fighters, the mid-range.
The fighters in the mid-range are sort of the same information, because our mid-ranger is the fact that they can play either style. They can go either way, so we can really just move to the fighters. And the fighters are actually, I think, the simplest plan of action. And it isn't just necessarily forward. It is, what is my hand? And it is 100% what is my hand.
That's fair. That's fair.
If you have 6 cross punches and charge forward, well, let's be honest, if you got 6 cross punches, you've probably already lost the game. But
that's fair.
The fighters have the hardest challenge, that if a summon comes down, you have to get through it, or you have to get to the summon.
Yeah.
So generally the best move is the double move, or it's the single move, and you play a couple summons to gain tempo for your following turns.
Yes.
You might have a couple 3 chis to set up. But if your hand is so atrocious, that's generally the only time you're moving to the right with the fighters.
Yeah.
You can almost even stay here with the fighters, being like, I hope I draw that card that, makes me at least somewhat of a threat to go forward. There's also the theory that should just be up here, and you just are gonna charge at that summon to try to take it out with your body, just whacking at it.
Yeah.
And taking your hits when you can, because that's the only advantage that the fighters really have, is they're gonna be able to take that 1 or 2, and I'm only saying 1 or 2 extra hits until you become like the rest of the squishies.
That's fair. Yeah.
Malik can take 3, but a general fighter can only really take 1 or 2 extra, and even 2 damage is all I'm talking about. You knock 4 damage off of Fang, she's at 21. Your squishy is a mage at this point.
Yeah. So, is there any value of bluffing the move in, just to show that, like, just say your average opening hand is at a 4.5 on the chi spectrum, so you have a few decent stuff, but nothing really to brag about. Just coming in twice, just to not show weakness in your play.
Yeah, I definitely have done first turn, double move up. They probably run to the side, and then my second turn I go, whoop.
Yeah. Just to throw their strategy off, mess them up. Or another thing you could do to keep some momentum, but not relieve pressure, is you could go over here too. It creates a little bit of distance, but it still is starting to cut your opponent off from parts of the board. But I think this is the big reason why like talking about your opening move, it really explains why fighters are at a disadvantage playstyle wise than anyone else, because it's so dependent on your opening hand, and that your one resource that you have in excess isn't that much more than anyone else's.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Like, Malik is only sitting at 10 points more health than Nubia, but I mean, you compare it to Idris, who's at 25, Long, who's at 28. He's not sitting at that much more. He really, like, you're so dependent on having a really well-built deck and having the right timing for things. It's hard playing fighters. Really hard playing fighters.
I agree.
All right. I still feel like we're just scratching the surface level for a lot of this.
There's so much. It's because, honestly, if you give me a hand, every single card in my hand gives me a different option to go with the board and what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Every time my opponent plays a summon, I have to think about all the movement that summon can make, whether I want to kill that summon, whether I want to go just after the opponent.
Mm-hmm.
There is so many extra little permutations that you have to think about.
Yeah.
But the basic concept I think that I was trying to teach, so for people watching, is that a lot of the time most people just move up, or not necessarily double move. They move up one square, and this is a lot of the time probably not the safest move.
Yeah. So if we're looking at it, this is the hyper aggressive move. So from your start, this is your hyper aggressive move. You're only doing that if you have the cards in your hand to back you up. This is your aggressive move, and it's really about what is your deck's purpose, and if putting the pressure is the right thing to do. These are your better defensive moves if you're trying to stay back and support something else. So if you're playing summons, or you don't have the right cards in your hand and you're trying to get the right cards in your hand. Now, what would you call the neutral zone of staying exactly where you are? When is the right time to do that?
That would be, I think I would call it the non-committal.
Okay.
You don't want to choose any of the other decisions. Maybe you went first and you don't know what your opponent's doing, so you're staying in this position because moving over here gets you farther away from your opponent. Moving up puts you in a threatens yourself if you don't have the right cards. Sitting where you are, it's still dangerous, but it's way less dangerous. So
I could see that if you draw your opening hand, you're sitting at your average chi being about 4.55, so it's on the lower end, but you have enough aggression that if you needed to, you can follow it up, but you're still just terrified of what your opponent is. So you're playing against Nubia, you don't know if Nubia is Tsunami or Angels, and running in against Angels is not your best bet. But if they're running Tsunamis, you don't want to be too far away because you have follow-up, or vice versa, something like that, right? You need to figure out what they are first, and staying in the center, because if you move to the side and they pair with you, then you know that they're being on their aggression. If you move to the side and they move away from you, that can hurt your opportunities down the road.
Sure.
Cool.
And I think if I go back to the championship, the games that I lost in my hands, I didn't like my hands. I went and I literally said this in my own head. I'm like, I need to move to the right and just lay back. Steve will move forward, summoned some summons about, and I went, I have to go clear those summons, and I charged forward, and I lost the game. And it's as simple as that. I told myself I needed to stay back, and then I didn't. My hand was not good at all. I think I had 3 out of my 4 Aura Surges from the deck in hand. It was that bad. The final match, and I know he did not have that. He had a lot of bolt shots.
Always with the bolt shots. The one thing I always like to imagine when I'm playing when I'm playing Genesis, is that I remember that. So Genesis is built around the arena style fighting, the gladiator type of fighting, and when you see a gladiator fight, They do this a lot in movies, but it's actually a real thing that a lot of fighters do, which is they circle each other. They want to figure out where your strengths, where your weaknesses are. They want to bide a little bit of time, because if you're making the first move, you want to make sure it's a very strategic move. You want to know, do they have a limp in their leg, or are they favoring the right side over the left side, right? You need to figure out those little things. And making them make a motion is a good way to do that. If you're both just staying in back middle, that means nobody has a good opening hand, and it's just waiting for the right move, right? So sometimes waiting in the beginning of the game is a very valuable asset. But I think that's because you and I are both heavy Axon players.
And even though we didn't really touch about it, combo. Did you get your combo? No? Run away.
Run away. Yep. That's all there is to it.
Usually you run away, and it usually doesn't help much. There's the rare chance you draw out of it, but
yeah,
not really.
That's fair. Cool. So, I think other future topics I would like to talk about are like evaluating the strength of your opening hand. I think that's a big thing, because there is no mulligan in this game. So figuring out. So one thing I kind of touch upon, I don't know if you ever do this, but when you look at your opening hand, looking at that average chi, maybe it's not an exact calculation, but you're looking at it, you're like, I'm heavier on my 7s, I don't have many 3s, this is a great opening hand, but does this lead me down to problems later on? Because I know I've done this a few times where I draw my opening hand, I see I have a lot of 7s in my hand, so I want to play energy cards as soon as possible, because I know that the next several cards are going to be heavy loaded on the 3s, or more likely heavy loaded on 3s. But if I have a lot of 3s in my hand...
Don't look at that.
You don't?
I do not. But it's an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, because your opening hand is going to predict a little bit of your next turn, because you know what the average chi of your deck is. But then there's more than just average chi in your deck. There's also the median chi of your deck, of like, are you running a heavy 6 deck or a heavy 3 deck, or like what are you doing? So yeah, I think that's all we can hit on for this topic, because we're almost out of time.
There was a lot more we could have said.
Yes,
guys. We only scratched the surface there.
I know Shahan had a lot of things. Would be. So going first, aggro versus defensive, back as summoners versus brawlers. So just say you're running an aggro deck, your opponent's running a defensive, you're going first. What is your more opening move?
Am I the aggro, or am I the?
You're aggro. You're aggro.
Aggro.
That's so aggro. That was so aggro. Too aggro.
I don't think, if we're currently looking at our champions, is there a champion that when you just see the champion on the board, you go, "This is a defensive deck"? Maybe Malik. I don't know if it's defensive. He's just got meteor. He's just meteor, but even that is usually not defensive.
I don't think that's much of a thing in the game, and I've been trying to test it out for a long time. There's slow play decks like long, but there's no pure defensive deck.
Yeah. Slow play decks, I think, include long. I think Idris, in a form, despite being aggro, is a slow play deck.
Yeah.
The longer the game goes with Idris, the more likely you are to lose, despite how aggressive the decks usually are.
Yeah. I completely agree with that. Yeah.
Aggro. Yeah.
I think you can talk about the game in tempo, but I don't think you can talk about the game in aggro versus defensive. The game's either a slow game or a fast game, but there isn't this concept of control like we have in Magic, where you're stopping the game at a lot of points. Here, there is no defensive style, really. And part of that's due to the fact that the board's just so small. It's very hard to always stay on the defensive. Also, the cards aren't suited for them. your best defensive card can always be replaced by a decent offensive card, and your deck will be better.
Mm-hmm.
The only exception to the rule, and it's because it does both, is Revenge of the Phoenix.
Yes. I can state the reason why defensive cards are weaker in this game for different reasons. If you are pairing card for card, and you have a defensive card, and I have a summon. If my summon hits you once, and you play your defensive card, at this point, my one card has gotten one card out of your hand.
Yeah.
And you have technically still not killed my summon. The following turn, my summon goes again, and maybe you play another defensive card, or you don't. Either way, I have now gained value out of my summon. You are down a card, or you've now down a second card.
Yeah.
And that is why the defensive cards aren't as great.
Yeah.
Currently, we're going to say.
And it's
because summons are so powerful,
yeah.
But they're also an investment. They're also your weakness.
Yeah. And that's part of the reason why when we talk about the best defensive cards in the deck, the best defensive cards in the game, I don't know. What's your number one defensive card in the game that you would say?
So it'd be Tsunami, Bolt Shot, Whirlwind Sweep, Hurricane Sweep.
My list would be like Rampage Toss and Gust.
That's true.
Those
are the nice small...
You soft counter the attack and you're dealing damage.
Yeah.
And that's why Gust will always see play over direct defense, let's say.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair.
Or Rampage Toss will always see play over, Blazing Strike. It's just the fact that it gives you that soft counter and it gives you that offensive feel to them. So that's why I don't think there is such thing as aggro versus defensive. When you're talking about the categories, Shahan kind of corrected. But yeah, we have casters, summoners, fighters. That's what the game's kind of built around. And there is that triangle kind of...
rock, scissors.
The rock, paper, scissors.
If you haven't... Because I've talked about it to Sid. I don't know if I talked about it to anybody else. About how the rock, paper, scissors is supposed to go. So, a fighter is supposed to be the mage. A mage is supposed to be the summoner. A summoner beats a fighter. Yeah. Now, currently in the game, the fighters are weaker, so it kind of goes like this. The mage beats the summoner and the fighter, and the mage has the advantage over the fighter. That does not mean that fighters cannot win. That is not what I'm saying. It's this: they have the advantage.
Championship was case in point.
For everybody. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The championship was a case in point where a fighter won the game. Like that, you can't deny the fact that Steve O's Boltshot deck is a fighter deck at the end of the day.
Sure.
And the Rain OTK, in a way, is a fighter deck. We said that the Assassin is a subset of the fighter.
That is true. Very true.
So it's just the fact that, and people may get really frustrated with me about saying this, but I've said it to Alex and I've said it to the design team, but I think in a lot of ways, the OTK deck was a healthy thing for the game because it was the win condition of the fighter. It is the only win condition of the fighter. The fighter just needs to get to a point where they build up enough resources and they go to the mage or the summoner, go to their face and just be like, I win. And they're like, darn it, yeah, you do.
I'll explain this a little bit for the people. So why this triangle works is the fighter has to get through every single summon the summoner plays in order to defeat the fighter. So it's an extremely uphill battle for the fighter to beat the summoner. However, the mage has AoE clear that is going to clear out both the summoner, clear out the summons, and hit the summon. However, the mage usually doesn't rely as much on summons, so the fighter is clear to get to the fighter and just beat her, clear to get to the mage and just beat him in the face.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a big thing that's missing is that the fighter doesn't have... the fighter and the caster are so similar that it's just easier to be a caster. Mm-hmm. But when we get to a point, and a lot of people who are in Future League, you'll start noticing this, is that spell cards are going to be doing a little bit less damage, but have a little bit more range to them. where the fighter cards would do a little bit more damage, but be a lot more close combat. So that way, when the fighter does get in your face, it's just going to be a dramatic drop in health. So you can never let the fighter come in close. And it's just something we weren't comfortable with. In the early days of testing, fighters did play a lot more OTK type of way, and it just didn't feel good. But I think that's what we need to move towards, is that fighters, and realistically, when Fong is toe-to-toe with Nubia should lose. Nubia should be afraid and sweating. But right now, it's just not the case.
Yeah, that's fair.
So Sean saying, I imagine for full defense we'll need some interesting alterations that modify the tempo of the game. Say an alteration that gives those summons decay too, off the top of my head. Yeah, so alterations are definitely going to play a big thing. Traps are going to play a big thing in the future of making fighters more viable and changing the pace of the game. We didn't even get to talk about traps today. That was a big thing. I think we should just...
We'll get new traps for next time.
Yep. We have more topics for next time. This was a good topic. I think it covered quite a bit. But yeah, I think we got to just call it here, unfortunately. Let me just double check Shahan's questions if there's anything else we can answer quickly. Oh yeah, so a whole other side of it was going second in the first round. And we didn't talk about that. That's, I think... that can have a little bit of a conversation another time, I guess.
For sure. I'll say a small bit about it is I think there's a misconception that going first is extremely better.
Yeah.
If you're running a summon deck, going second is generally the better position. Because your opponent immediately has to give up one of their initiatives, and then you have so many initiatives to choose from.
I would even... I completely agree with you 100% when it comes to summoners, because one of the big advantage summoners have is that they can bait out your opponent's exerts. But the other side to it is, I'd even argue that at times it might be better for a fighter to go second, because if you have the evasion, it's okay if for your opponent to make the first strike. The big thing is you want to see what your opponent's doing before committing to anything. So it depends again on what type of fighter you are.
I agree with that. I literally just went off that. I was playing earlier a test game, and there was a Death's Companion that I couldn't hit anymore. It was late in the game. I no longer had anything ranged to hit. So I was literally Malik on this side. Rain was just hiding behind it on this side. For my turn, I just stood there, and I took my 5 damage lumps, and then I went back to the next turn, and he stayed here. He swung at me again, and I went Oten, and then I went my turn, move, kill you.
Yeah. There are a lot of times. I think the big thing about fighters is that early game and late game you want to be second, but mid game you want to be first, and that's one of the biggest pain points. So if you can figure out what type of style you are, that's where it shifts. But early tournaments, I remember when the game first came out, everyone had the assumption that whoever goes first wins the game. It was a thing people complained about. They even were demanding that I change the rules so that the priority shifts per round or some other special thing. There was so much uproar about this. And then we did our first few tournaments, and the person who won every single tournament, they went second every single game. And it came down to their style. They were just a lot better at playing second.
That's
so I don't think there's any inherent value of going first. You have advantages at certain points of the games, and then you lose those advantages at other points of the game.
Unless you're Thymos.
Unless you're Thymos. What does Thymos have that really changes that? Is it adrenaline?
No, if you're Thymos and you go first, then you got landslides.
Yeah, that's true.
You got strangle vines. There's a 3 that many people don't use.
Fire chain.
Which is actually really good. Fire chains.
Yeah.
You got fire chains. They got all the stun abilities that are really only good if you go first.
Yeah. They're definitely more useful if you're going first. And then there's also Guardian of Balance, which is definitely more useful if you're going first. But also, it doesn't mean that these cards are just useless. Well, some of them are.
Correct. Correct. It
Not all.
depends on the match. It depends
Yeah.
on the matchups.
Yeah.
Always.
Cool. I think that I hope that answers everything that was for this topic. We may have to revisit again in the future. We're probably going to spend some time after this to make a list of other future topics that we need to go over. But for everyone who's watching, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Shahan, for being very active in the chats and giving us your questions. If you have topics that you want us to cover in future chats, then we're more than willing to do that. I think the great part is here, you have not just the designer standpoint, but you also have someone who's very competitive in the game as well. Competitive and casual. I think you play the game in both spectrums fairly well.
I do.
So I think that's where these conversations are very unique and very useful. So if you have ideas for future topics, let us know. Otherwise, I think we're just gonna wrap things up for this week. All right. So thank you, everyone, and have a good night.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one.